$5. That is what they decided she was worth. Lydia Carver stood on that auction platform watching the gavel rise, knowing her entire future was about to be sold to a drunk who thought she was a joke. Then a voice cut through the laughter. $100 for the contract. The silent cowboy who spoke those words was drowning in his own demons. He had not smiled in 2 years, had not stopped drinking since the night his wife died calling his name while he lay passed out in a saloon. He did not save Lydia that day. He gave her something far more dangerous. A choice. What happened next will make you believe that the darkest moments of our lives are sometimes doorways to everything we have been searching for. Stay with me until the end. This story will change how you see second chances forever. This is not just a love story. This is a story about what happens when two broken people stop running from their past and start choosing their future. It will teach you that your worth is never decided by others. It is decided by you. And sometimes the person who saves you is not a hero. They are just someone brave enough to give you the choice to save yourself. The meaning of this story is simple but powerful. We do not get to choose the hand life deals us, but we always get to choose how we play it. Lydia was sold for $5. She could have broken. She could have begged. Instead, she lifted her chin and refused to let strangers define her value. Jonah had been dying slowly for 2 years, drowning in guilt and whiskey. He could have stayed in that darkness forever. Instead, he chose to live. And Tom Bridger, a man who had done terrible things. He proved that it is never too late to become someone worth remembering. The lesson is this. Your past does not have to be your prison. Your mistakes do not have to be your identity. And sometimes the best thing someone can give you is not rescue. It is room to choose who you want to become. Drop a comment below and tell me, what moment hit you the hardest? Was it the auction, the seller, Tom's sacrifice? I read every single comment, and I want to know which part stayed with you. The dust hung in the air like a living thing, thick and golden in the late afternoon light that slanted across the town of Sweetwater Crossing. It coated everything. The false-fronted buildings lining the main street, the horses tied to hitching posts, the faces of the crowd gathered in the square. Lydia Carver could taste it on her tongue, gritty and bitter, mixing with the copper tang of fear she had been swallowing for 3 weeks straight. She stood on the auction platform with her spine rigid and her hands clenched so tight the nails cut crescents into her palms. The rough pine boards beneath her feet still held splinters from the morning's livestock sale. She had watched them auction off horses, cattle, and farm equipment before the auctioneer turned his attention to what he called contract obligations. The term was polite, clinical. It made the whole thing sound legitimate. It was not. 3 weeks ago, she had buried a child beside a nameless trail. Robert's child. She had been alone, bleeding, terrified, and she had wrapped that tiny unfinished life in her only clean petticoat and dug a hole with her bare hands while the stagecoach driver shouted for her to hurry up. She never even knew if it was a boy or girl. Now she stood here, and these men were deciding what she was worth. "Gentlemen," the auctioneer called, his voice carrying across the crowd with practiced ease. He was a thin man with a waxed mustache and eyes that never quite met hers. "We have before us Miss Lydia Carver, lately arrived from Missouri. The contract in question specifies 2 years of domestic service to satisfy the outstanding debt of one Mr. Robert Thornhill, who has unfortunately departed our territory." Unfortunately. The word twisted in Lydia's chest like a knife. Robert Thornhill had departed all right, in the dead of night, with the $800 she had saved for 5 years working as a seamstress in St. Louis. The money that was supposed to start their new life together. The money he had convinced her to let him invest in supplies for their journey west. She had arrived in Sweetwater Crossing expecting a fiancé and a future. She had found a boarding housekeeper who had never heard of Robert Thornhill, a land office with no record of his claim, and a saloon owner who remembered him well. remembered watching him ride out heading south with his saddlebags full, and a blonde woman who definitely was not his mail-order bride. The saloon owner had also produced a contract, a piece of paper with Robert's signature and Lydia's name, listing her as collateral against a $500 gambling debt. It was fraud, obviously, forgery. But the territorial judge had looked at her with tired eyes and explained that without funds for a lawyer or witnesses to prove she had never signed it, the contract stood. She could work it off, he had said. 2 years was not so long. Some girls had it much worse. So here she stood, trying to hold on to something that felt increasingly like vapor. Her dignity, her sense of self, the belief that she was more than what these men saw when they looked at her. The crowd was mostly male, weathered faces shadowed by hat brims, eyes assessing her with the same calculating attention they had given the breeding stock. A few women lingered at the edges, their expressions ranging from pity to contempt. Lydia could not decide which was worse. She is healthy, the auctioneer continued, warming to his pitch. Educated, can read and write, cook, sew, manage a household, no known ailments or, he paused delicately, complications. Lydia felt heat crawl up her neck. She fixed her gaze on the horizon beyond the crowd, on the line where the dusty street met the purple mountains in the distance. She would not cry. She would not beg. She would not give them that satisfaction. "We will start the bidding at $20, the auctioneer announced. Silence, heavy and thick as the dust. Lydia's heart hammered against her ribs. $20 was nothing, less than a decent horse, a fraction of what a skilled craftsman might earn in a month. And still no one spoke. $20, the auctioneer repeated, his voice taking on a slight edge. For 2 years of guaranteed service. Gentlemen, this is a bargain. More silence. Someone in the crowd coughed. A horse stamped and snorted at the hitching rail. 15, then, the auctioneer said, his professional smile tightening. Surely someone can see the value in 15. A man near the front spat tobacco juice into the dirt. Another turned away, losing interest. Lydia watched them dismiss her with less consideration than they had given the mules. $10. The auctioneer's voice had gone flat. $10 for 2 years of contract service. A murmur rippled through the crowd, but it was not interest. It was amusement. They were enjoying this, watching her value drop like stones down a well, measuring her humiliation by the dollar. Lydia's breath came shallow. The sun beat down on her head. Sweat trickled down her spine beneath the high collar of her dress. It was her best dress. The deep blue cotton she had sewn herself with careful tiny stitches. She had put it on this morning thinking it might help, that looking respectable might matter. It did not. Come now, the auctioneer cajoled, desperation creeping into his tone. She is clean and able-bodied. A man could do worse for help around a homestead. I could hire a ranch hand for less, someone called out. Laughter followed. And he would work harder, another voice added. More laughter. Lydia's vision blurred at the edges. She locked her knees, terrified they might give way. This could not be happening. This could not be her life. Standing on a platform in a town she had never heard of 6 months ago, being rejected even as property. $5. The voice came from the back, rough and amused. A heavy-set man in dirty canvas pants grinned with missing teeth. I will give you $5 for the entertainment value alone. The crowd erupted in hoots and jeers. The men around him clapped him on the shoulder, egging him on. We have $5, the auctioneer said quickly, relief plain in his voice. $5 for... That is not a bid, Charlie. That is an insult, someone else called. Even for you. Then you bid higher. But no one did. The auctioneer raised his gavel. Lydia watched it rise, that small wooden hammer that was about to seal her fate. $5. Less than the cost of the dress she was wearing. Less than she had paid for her stage ticket west. Less than anything she had ever imagined her life might be reduced to. The gavel hung at the top of its arc. This was the moment, she realized, where something inside her could break or harden. She could feel it like a physical thing, a crossroads in her chest. She could beg. throw herself on the mercy of the crowd, plead for someone to see her as human. Or she could stand here, silent and straight. Let them do their worst while keeping the one thing they could not auction off. Her choice. She lifted her chin higher. 100. For the contract. The voice cut through the crowd like a blade. Quiet, but with an authority that made heads turn. It came from the left, near the saloon. And it belonged to a man Lydia had not noticed before. He stood in the shade of the saloon's awning, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in dark canvas pants and a faded blue shirt rolled to the elbows. His hat was pulled low, shadowing his face, but she could see the line of his jaw and the stillness in the way he held himself. Different from the restless energy of the other men, controlled, but also wrong. He held an empty whiskey bottle in one hand, which he set on the hitching rail as he stepped forward. His eyes were red-rimmed, hollow. He moved like a man who had forgotten why he bothered moving at all. Whispers rippled through the crowd. That is Blackwood, gone half mad since his woman died. What is he doing? The crowd went silent. I am sorry, the auctioneer said, blinking. Did you say $100? The man stepped forward and the crowd parted for him automatically. For the contract termination, not the service. Lydia's heart stuttered. Termination. Now hold on, the auctioneer sputtered. This is a contract auction, not a... The contract specifies satisfaction of debt, the man interrupted. His voice was still quiet, but carrying an edge now. It does not specify the method. I am offering to buy out the debt entirely. Cash. Right now. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a leather fold, counted bills onto the auctioneer's table with calm, deliberate movements. The crowd pressed closer, craning to see. That is, the auctioneer started. Legal, the man finished. Unless you would like to explain to Judge Morrison why you rejected a full payment in favor of an indentured contract sale. I imagine he would have questions about whether this whole proceeding was properly filed. The auctioneer's face went red, then pale. His eyes darted to someone in the crowd, the sheriff maybe. Lydia caught the look that passed between them. The sheriff gave a small nod. Crawford's man, she would learn later. Letting this play out for reasons of his own. Fine, the auctioneer bit out. Sold. Contract terminated upon receipt of payment, just like that. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that made Lydia flinch. Around her, the crowd began to disperse, their entertainment over, already forgetting her face. The heavy-set man who had bid $5 spat in disgust and turned away. Lydia stood frozen on the platform. Sold. The word echoed in her head, even though she knew that was not quite what had happened. The stranger had said, termination. He had said, you can step down now, miss. The auctioneer's voice was cold. You are free to go. Free. Another word that did not make sense. She looked down at the platform steps, then at her hands, still clenched, white-knuckled in front of her. Slowly, carefully, she unclenched them. Her fingers ached. She descended the steps on shaking legs. The man, her purchaser, her liberator, she did not know what to call him, stood waiting at the bottom. Up close, she could see more. The weathered tan of someone who worked outdoors, the silver threading through dark hair at his temples, the fine lines around his eyes. Older than her, maybe 38 or 40. His eyes were gray, she noticed, gray like storm clouds before rain. But it was what she did not see that struck her most. She did not see kindness. She did not see calculation. She saw emptiness. The hollow of someone who had already given up on himself. Miss Carver, he said, touching the brim of his hat. You... Lydia's voice came out as a whisper. She cleared her throat and tried again. You just paid $100. I did. Why? It was bold, demanding an answer from a stranger who owed her nothing. But she had just been auctioned like livestock. Boldness felt like the least dangerous thing she could muster. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but a softening around the eyes. Because $5 was an insult, he said simply. And watching it happen was worse. Lydia studied him. Around them, the crowd still milled in the square. The men who had watched in silence or laughed at her humiliation. "I do not understand," she said. "You do not have to." He gestured toward the edge of the square where a wagon stood hitched to two sturdy horses. Worn but well-maintained. Working supplies in the back. "I have a ranch about 8 miles north of here, up in the hill country. There is a room with a lock on the inside. You are free to use it or free to walk away. Your choice. Your choice." 2 words she had not heard in months. Lydia looked back at the auction platform, at the town that had just watched her sell for $5, then at the mountains rising purple in the distance. She did not know if she was riding toward hope or away from the last scraps of certainty she had left. But for the first time since St. Louis, she was the one choosing. "I do not know whether you just saved me," she said quietly, "or dragged me into something worse." The silent cowboy looked at her for a long moment. "Neither do I." Lydia climbed onto the wagon. 8 miles of dirt track climbing into the hills. Lydia tried conversation. The silent cowboy responded in single words or silence. She learned his name was Jonah Blackwood. His wife had died 2 years ago. The ranch ran cattle and horses. He had one hired hand who came 3 days a week. What she did not learn was anything that explained why a stranger would pay $100 to free her. The sun dropped behind the mountains as they climbed, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Any other time, Lydia might have found it beautiful. Now she was too exhausted, too uncertain, too aware of the man sitting silent beside her to appreciate anything. Jonah Blackwood did not look at her. His eyes stayed fixed on the road ahead, his hands steady on the reins. He had the stillness of a man who had grown comfortable with silence. Or maybe just a man who had nothing left to say. The ranch appeared as the last light faded from the sky. A log house nestled against the hillside. A barn and several outbuildings scattered around it. Corrals with a few horses. A creek running through the near pasture, catching the last of the sunset like a ribbon of gold. It should have looked welcoming. It did not. As they approached, Lydia saw bottles on the porch, shutters hanging crooked. The garden overgrown to ruin, weeds as tall as her waist where flowers might have once bloomed. The house did not look lived in. It looked endured. Jonah brought the wagon to a stop and set the brake. He climbed down and came around to help her, offering his hand with the same formal courtesy he had shown in town. His hands were steady, his eyes were not. Lydia followed him up the porch steps, glass crunching under her boots. He did not apologize for the bottles, did not explain. Just pushed open the front door and stepped aside to let her enter. The interior confirmed what the exterior suggested. Dust on every surface, a stone fireplace with cold ashes, a scarred wooden table with one chair. The other chair lay broken in the corner, as if someone had thrown it. Empty bottles lined the windowsills. A bookshelf with gaps where volumes had been removed or thrown. This was not a home. This was a mausoleum for someone still breathing. "Kitchen is through there," Jonah said, gesturing. His voice was flat, hollow. "Stove is tricky. Burns hot on the left side, barely warms on the right. You will figure it out." He showed her the narrow staircase that led to the second floor. 2 doors faced each other across a small landing. He pointed to the first. "Yours. Lock works from inside. Then the second door. That one stays closed." He said it flat, but Lydia noticed. The threshold was worn smooth. Someone passed through often, and through the gap beneath the door came the faint flicker of lamplight. Someone kept a light burning in the closed room. Jonah turned to go back downstairs, then stopped. "There is bread and cheese in the kitchen if you are hungry. Help yourself to anything. Mr. Blackwood." He paused, turned. "Thank you," Lydia said, "for what you did today. I do not know how to... I cannot..." The words tangled up. Inadequate. How did you thank someone for buying back your dignity? For giving you a choice when everyone else had decided you did not deserve one? "You do not have to thank me," Jonah said quietly. "Just be safe here. That is enough." He left then, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. Lydia heard him moving around downstairs, the sounds of a man going through familiar evening routines. She stood in the small room with her carpetbag at her feet and looked out the window at the mountains turning purple in the dusk. Be safe here. Such a simple offer. Such an impossible promise. Left alone, Lydia unpacked her few belongings. 2 dresses, a brush, a mirror that had been her mother's, a small portrait of that same mother, dead now 18 months. The room was acceptable, the bed was clean, the lock worked. Every instinct told her something was deeply wrong here. But Lydia did not leave. Instead, she told herself what she had told herself all her life. I do not need anyone to tell me what is safe. I have survived this far alone. I can handle whatever this is. Her flaw. Pride disguised as independence. The refusal to admit she might need help, even when danger was obvious. It had gotten her this far. It had also gotten her on that auction platform. She unpacked her few belongings slowly. Hung her 2 dresses in the narrow wardrobe. Set her brush and mirror on the dresser. Placed the portrait of her mother on the windowsill where it would catch the morning light. It did not take long. Her whole life fit in a single drawer. When she was done, she sat on the bed and let herself feel it. The exhaustion, the fear, the shock of everything that had happened. But she did not cry. She had promised herself that on the platform, and she would keep that promise. Instead, she stood, straightened her dress, and went downstairs. Jonah was not in the main room. Through the window, she could see him on the porch, silhouetted against the last light, bottle in hand. Lydia found bread and cheese in the kitchen as promised. She ate alone at the scarred wooden table, listening to the silence of a house that felt more like a tomb than a home. Later, in her room, she lay awake listening to unfamiliar sounds. Wind through pines, distant coyotes, the creak of old wood settling, then footsteps in the hallway, the creak of that forbidden door opening, and then the sound of a grown man weeping. Lydia crept to her door, opened it a crack. Across the landing, lamplight spilled from the other room. She could just see inside through the gap, a cradle draped in dust, a wedding dress hanging on a hook, white going yellow, dried flowers on a dresser, a woman's bonnet, and Jonah Blackwood sitting on the floor with his back against the cradle, bottle in hand, sobbing. Margaret, I am sorry, I am so sorry. The name was a prayer, a curse, a wound that would not close. Lydia closed her door silently, pressed her back against it, heart hammering. The man who had bought her freedom was drowning, had been drowning for 2 years. She could hear it in every broken syllable. The question was whether he meant to drag her down with him, or whether she was arrogant enough to think she could save a man who did not want saving. Morning came gray and cold. Lydia woke before dawn, unsure what had pulled her from sleep. Then she heard it, the sound of an axe biting into wood. She dressed quickly in her work dress, the sturdy gray cotton she had made for practicality rather than beauty, and went downstairs. Through the kitchen window, she could see Jonah at the woodpile. He moved with mechanical precision, splitting logs with an efficiency that spoke of long practice. He had not slept, she guessed. His shirt was the same one from yesterday, and even from this distance she could see the darkness under his eyes. Lydia made coffee. The grounds were old, as he had warned, but the result was drinkable. She found a cup that was not too dirty, and poured one for herself. Then she did what she always did when she did not know what else to do. She started cleaning. The kitchen table came first. Years of grime came up under her scrub brush, revealing wood grain that had been hidden so long she doubted Jonah remembered it existed. She organized the cupboards, found mouse droppings, and cleared them away. Opened windows to air out the stale grief that seemed to permeate every corner. She was elbow-deep in soapy water when Jonah came in. He stopped in the doorway. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe. Or discomfort. You are not a servant. Lydia did not look up. I am not a charity case either. I stay, I work. Do not try to stop me. A beat of silence. Then Jonah said, "Coffee is in the tin above the stove. Grounds are 3 days old, but they will do. I already found it." The smallest concession, the slightest crack in his armor. Lydia filed it away. The days took on a rhythm. Lydia cleaned, cooked, mended what she could, and made lists of what she could not. The house fought her at every turn, 2 years of neglect, not easily undone, but she was stubborn. She had always been stubborn. Jonah worked outside, rode out early, came back late, spoke in single syllables when he spoke at all, ate what she put in front of him without comment, disappeared into that closed room every night. They moved around each other like planets in separate orbits, close enough to feel each other's gravity, never quite touching. On the third day, Lydia found the journal. She had been dusting the bookshelf in the main room when she noticed a small leather volume tucked between larger ones. Different from the others, clearly a woman's with a ribbon bookmark and worn edges that spoke of frequent handling. She knew she should not read it. She read it anyway. Margaret Blackwood had beautiful handwriting. Neat, careful letters that filled the pages with observations and dreams and the small daily details of a life being built. The first entries were full of happiness. Jonah brought home the cradle today. He made it himself from the oak tree we planted when we first arrived. I cannot stop touching it, imagining our child sleeping there. The garden is coming along. Jonah says the soil here is good, and he is right. Everything I plant seems to flourish. We talked about names last night. He likes Eleanor for a girl. I like it too. Eleanor Blackwood. Our daughter. Then the tone changed. Months of entries grew shorter, sadder. He is drinking again. He barely speaks anymore. It is like living with a ghost. He did not come home last night. I waited up until dawn. The final entry stopped Lydia's heart. He is gone again. We argued. He found the letter from V and would not listen to my explanation. My belly hurts. Something is wrong. I am frightened. Where is he? God, please let him come home in time. The entry ended mid-sentence. Lydia closed the journal with trembling hands. She knew now why Jonah wept in the night, why he kept that room as a shrine, why he looked at the world with eyes that had already given up. He had not just lost his wife. He had been absent when she died. But there was more here. Something about a letter. Someone whose name started with V. The question that kept her awake that night was whether this was tragedy or something worse, and what exactly she had gotten herself into by climbing onto that wagon. The rider appeared on the fourth morning. Lydia was hauling water from the creek when she heard hoofbeats approaching fast. Her hand went to the knife at her belt, a small blade she had started carrying since arriving, before she recognized the horse. A man in his early 30s swung down from the saddle. Sandy hair, sun-weathered face, a jaw that looked like it had met more than a few fists over the years. His hand hovered near the gun at his hip as he looked at her. His eyes were not friendly. "You must be the woman from the auction. Word travels fast. Word travels." He studied her with open suspicion. "Question is what you are doing here." Lydia set down her water bucket. "Working. Same as anyone. Working." His tone made the word sound dirty. "That what they call it now? Mr. Bridger. Tom Bridger. I work for Jonah." "Then perhaps you should ask Jonah what I'm doing here instead of making assumptions." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe. Or reluctant respect. Before he could respond, Jonah appeared from the barn. He looked between them with the wary expression of a man expecting trouble. "Tom, you are early. Heard some news in town. Figured you would want to know right away." Tom's eyes flicked to Lydia. "Maybe we should talk private. She can hear it." Tom's eyebrows rose, but he did not argue. "Crawford's been making moves. Bought out the Henderson place last week, and the Wilsons are selling. Says he made them an offer they could not refuse." Jonah's jaw tightened. "That puts him on 3 sides of us now. And there is more." Tom glanced at Lydia again, then continued. "Talk in town as he has been asking about her, wanting to know who she is. where she came from. Lydia felt cold despite the morning sun. Jonah was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Let him ask. Jonah, she is not his business. None of this is his business. Crawford thinks everything in this valley is his business." Tom's voice dropped. "You know that. You know what he wants. And bringing her here now, of all times." He shook his head. "If she is working for him, she is not." "How do you know?" Jonah looked at Lydia. Really looked at her for the first time since that day in the square. "Because I looked in her eyes on that platform. That was not acting." Tom stayed for coffee but remained wary. Lydia learned that he came 3 days a week to help with the heavy ranch work, that he had worked for Jonah for 3 years, that he was not from Wyoming originally but did not say where he was from. She also learned that Victor Crawford owned the Triple C Ranch east of here, that he had been buying up land and water rights for years, that he wanted Jonah's Creek and the grazing land that went with it, and that he had made offers, generous ones at first, then less generous, then offers that sounded more like threats. "Jonah won't sell," Tom said while Jonah was out checking the herd. "This land is..." He stopped. "This land is all he has left of her. His wife." Tom nodded. "Margaret. She is buried on the hill up there. He won't leave her." Lydia thought about the shrine upstairs, the journal, the unfinished entry. What happened to her? Tom was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Died in childbirth. 2 years ago come spring. Jonah was... he was not here when it happened." The words confirmed what Lydia had already guessed, but hearing them spoken aloud made them heavier somehow. "He blames himself. Would not you?" That afternoon, Lydia walked to the creek to fetch more water. A rider appeared on the opposite bank. He was older than Jonah, maybe 50, well-dressed in clothes that cost more than everything Lydia owned. He sat a fine horse with the ease of a man who had been riding since before he could walk. He tipped his hat. "You must be Blackwood's new help." His smile was courteous. His eyes were not. "Victor Crawford," he said. "I own the Triple C Ranch east of here. We are neighbors after a fashion. Lydia Carver, Miss Carver." He seemed to taste the name. "Carver. Any relation to the Carvers of St. Louis?" Lydia's blood went cold. Number. Strange. You look familiar somehow. Have we met before?" "I do not believe so." Crawford studied her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. Then he smiled again, and somehow that was worse. "Well, do give Mr. Blackwood my regards. Tell him I hope to speak with him soon about mutual interests." He touched his hat brim and rode away. Lydia watched him go with a feeling in her gut she could not name. Fear, yes, but something else too. Recognition. She did not know this man, she was certain of it. So why did he feel so familiar? Evening came with storm clouds building over the mountains. Lydia was washing dishes when she heard commotion from the barn. Shouts. A horse's frightened whinny. She grabbed the lantern and ran. Inside the barn, she found Jonah on his knees beside a calf that had gotten tangled in wire. Blood seeped from cuts along its legs and belly. The mother cow watched anxiously from the next stall, lowing in distress. Jonah's hands moved with patient precision, cutting the wire away strand by strand. He spoke softly to the animal, calming it. "Easy now. Easy. I know it hurts. Just hold still a little longer." His voice was different, softer. The hollow deadness that usually filled it was gone, replaced by something gentler, something almost human. Lydia held the lantern steady while he worked. The calf struggled, then gradually calmed under his hands. "Bandages," Jonah said without looking up. "Cabinet by the door, top shelf." She found them, brought them, watched as he cleaned and wrapped the wounds with the same careful precision. "She will live," he said finally. "Might have a limp, but she will live." He stood, wiping bloody hands on his pants. For a moment their eyes met, and Lydia saw something in his that surprised her. Not emptiness, Exhaustion, yes. Grief, certainly. But also something else. Something that looked almost like hope. Then it was gone, shuttered behind the familiar walls. And he was just Jonah Blackwood again. The silent cowboy who had paid $100 for a stranger and could not say why. Tom appeared beside Lydia as Jonah walked back to the house. He used to be different, Tom said quietly, before Margaret. Used to laugh so loud you could hear it across the valley. He paused. Rode 30 miles in a blizzard once, just to fetch a doctor for a neighbor's kid, a kid he had never met, because someone told him the family could not afford to go themselves. Lydia watched Jonah's retreating back. What happened? You mean besides his wife dying while he was gone? Yes, besides that. Besides, Tom was quiet for a long time. Some things break a man, he said finally, and some things just show him he was already broken. I am not sure which this was. That night, Lydia could not sleep. She wandered the main room in the darkness, running her fingers along book spines, trying not to think about the sounds she knew would come from behind that closed door. One book caught her eye. Not Margaret's journal, which she had returned to its place on the shelf, but another, older, a collection of letters tucked between the pages. She should not read them. She read them anyway. The first letter was written in Margaret's handwriting, but it was not addressed to Jonah. It was addressed to someone named V. Dear V, I cannot marry you. I know you think this is sudden, but I have met someone. His name is Jonah. He understands me in ways I cannot explain. I am sorry for any pain this causes. You have been kind to me. But kindness is not enough. I need someone who sees me. Really sees me. Please do not write again, Margaret. The letter was dated 3 years before Margaret's death, v. Victor Crawford. The pieces began to fall into place. Crawford's hostility toward Jonah, his obsession with this land, his interest in Lydia herself. Margaret had been engaged to Crawford before she met Jonah, had broken that engagement within a week of meeting him, and Crawford had never forgiven either of them. Lydia heard the footsteps before she saw Jonah. He appeared in the doorway, a bottle in his hand, freezing when he saw her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Jonah said, "You are reading her letters." It was not a question. Lydia closed the book. "I am sorry. I should not have. You should not have. But you did." He moved into the room, set the bottle on the table. "What did you find?" "Letters to someone named V." Lydia watched his face. Victor Crawford. Something shifted in Jonah's expression. Pain, yes, but also something older, darker. She was engaged to him. Before me, did you know that? I figured it out. He proposed to her the day she arrived in town. Mail-order bride. She was supposed to marry him. Jonah's voice was flat, hollow. Then she met me, and 1 week later she told him no. He never forgave you. He never forgave her. Jonah looked at the bottle on the table but did not reach for it. She used to get letters from him, even after we were married, begging her to leave me, telling her she had made a mistake. Did she answer them? No, she burned most of them, but some she kept. I found them. After... He stopped. After. Is that why you... Lydia stopped herself. But Jonah knew what she was asking. Is that why I was drinking the night she died? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Partly. We argued about the letters. I said things I should not have said, and then I left. And then... He did not finish. He did not have to. They stood in the darkness for a long time. Then Lydia said I lost a child. On the way here, Robert's child. Jonah looked at her. I buried it myself beside the trail in a place I will never find again. I do not even know if it was a boy or a girl. Just blood and pain and being completely alone. Silence. Why are you telling me this? Because you are the first person who has looked at me without judgment. I figure I owe you the same. More silence. The wind howled outside, pushing against the windows. Then Jonah said, her name was supposed to be Eleanor, if she had lived. Margaret wanted Eleanor. He had never told anyone that. Lydia could hear it in his voice, could hear the weight of those words, held so long in silence. Eleanor, she repeated softly. It is a beautiful name. Jonah looked at her, really looked at her. For a moment, the walls came down. The hollow emptiness retreated. And she saw the man Tom had described. The one who rode 30 miles in a blizzard for a stranger's child. The one who laughed loud enough to echo across the valley. Then the moment passed. The walls rebuilt themselves, and Jonah reached for the bottle. But he did not open it. He just held it, looking at it, like he was deciding something. Then he set it down and walked away. The storm came 3 days later. It blew in from the mountains with a fury that Lydia had never seen. Wind that screamed through the valley, rain that fell sideways, thunder that shook the house to its foundation. Jonah rode in hard from the range, water streaming from his hat brim. We need to secure the animals, he said. Now! They worked side by side in the storm, Lydia holding horses while Jonah secured stalls. Tom joining them when he appeared through the downpour, having ridden from town when he saw the clouds building. By the time they got inside, all 3 of them were soaked to the bone. Tom built up the fire while Lydia found dry clothes. Jonah just stood by the window, watching the storm rage outside. Crawford's Creek will flood, Tom said. If it jumps its banks, it could take out the low pasture. Let it. Jonah, let it. Jonah did not turn from the window. Some things you cannot fight. Some things you just have to survive. Lydia watched him, saw the set of his shoulders, the tension in his jaw. He was not talking about the storm. That night they sat by the fire. The storm still raged, but the worst had passed. Now it was just rain, steady and cold and relentless. Tom had fallen asleep in the chair by the door, his hat pulled over his eyes. Lydia and Jonah sat on opposite ends of the hearth, the fire between them. Silence stretched. Then Lydia said, I know about Crawford, about Margaret, about all of it. Jonah did not move. I found the letters. I read her journal. I know she was engaged to him before you. I know he has never forgiven you for taking her. Still nothing. And I know, Lydia continued quietly, that whatever happened the night she died, it was not your fault. Jonah's head came up. His eyes found hers. You do not know that. I know guilt when I see it. I have been carrying my own long enough. Your guilt is not the same, is it not? Lydia leaned forward. I stole $200 from my employer in St. Louis to pay for medicine that did not save my mother. I was about to be arrested when Robert's letters arrived. I knew he was a gambler. I saw the signs, but I chose to believe his lies because the alternative was prison. She took a breath. I made choices that put me on that auction platform. I am not innocent. I am not some victim that Crawford plucked at random. I ran away from consequences and I found new ones waiting. Jonah stared at her. Why are you telling me this? Because you have been punishing yourself for 2 years for not being there when your wife died. And maybe you should have been there. Maybe you made mistakes. But you are still alive, Jonah. And dying slow is not going to bring her back. The fire crackled. The rain hammered against the windows. Then Jonah said, You did not know me before. No, I was different. He stopped. I was someone worth knowing. You still are. He laughed, but there was pain in it. You do not believe that. I believe you paid $100 to free a stranger. I believe you saved a calf that most men would have left to die. I believe you keep a light burning in that room every night because you think you owe her that much. Lydia stood, moved closer. And I believe that whatever you did or did not do 2 years ago, you have more than paid for it. The question is when you are going to stop punishing yourself and start living again. Jonah looked up at her. His eyes were wet. I do not know how. Then learn. She held out her hand. Jonah looked at it for a long moment. Then slowly he took it. Morning came gray and damp. The storm had passed, leaving behind swollen creeks and muddy roads. Tom rode out early to check on the herd, leaving Lydia and Jonah alone, in a silence that felt different from before, heavier, but also more honest. Lydia made breakfast, eggs from the chickens she had started tending, bread she had baked 2 days ago, coffee that was actually fresh for once. Jonah ate without comment, but she noticed he finished everything. First time since she had arrived. "I've been thinking," he said finally. "Dangerous habit." The ghost of a smile crossed his face. "About what you said last night. About living. And? And I do not know if I can. But I want to try." Lydia set down her coffee cup. "That is all anyone can ask. There is something else." Jonah pushed back from the table. "I should have told you sooner. About Crawford. About what he wants. I think I have figured most of it out. Not all of it." He stood. "Come with me." He led her to the hill behind the house. 2 markers stood there. One was older, weathered by years of wind and sun. The other was newer, fresher. The older one read simply Blackwood. The newer one read Margaret Blackwood, beloved wife. And dates that showed she had been only 26 when she died. Jonah stood beside the graves with his hat in his hands. "She came west as a mail-order bride," he said. "Crawford sent for her, paid her passage from Ohio, had everything arranged, but she chose you instead. She chose me." Jonah's voice was rough. 1 week after meeting Crawford, she told him she could not marry him. 1 month later, we were wed. 1 year later, she was dead, and Crawford has been trying to take everything from you ever since. Not everything. Jonah looked at her. Just this. The land, the water, the life we built together. He paused. "But I think there is more now. I think he sent someone to find you." "What?" "The man who stole your money. Robert Thornhill." Jonah's jaw tightened. "I have been asking questions in town. Thornhill was not just a drifter. He had connections here. People who knew him before he went east." Lydia felt cold despite the morning sun. "What kind of connections?" "The kind that lead back to the Triple C." They walked back to the house in silence. Lydia's mind was spinning. Robert Thornhill connected to Crawford. The man who had stolen her savings, who had left her name on a fraudulent contract, who had put her on that auction platform. It could not be coincidence. Nothing about this was coincidence. Inside, she found Tom waiting. His face was grim. "Trouble," he said. 3 cattle dead by the creek. Poisoned water." Jonah's expression went hard. "Show me." The cattle lay where they had fallen, beside a section of creek that ran through a narrow gully. Their bodies were bloated, their legs stiff. Flies had already started to gather. Tom pointed to the water. "See how the color is off? Downstream it clears up. But right here, where the Triple C land borders ours..." "Someone dumped something in the water," Jonah finished. "Crawford. Has to be. He has been pushing harder since..." Tom glanced at Lydia. "Since things changed around here." Lydia felt sick. "He killed these animals because of me?" "He killed these animals because he is a snake," Tom said. "You just gave him an excuse to move faster." Jonah stood at the creek's edge, looking at the dead cattle. His hands were clenched at his sides. "This is how it starts," he said quietly. "First the water, then the fences, then the accidents that are not accidents. He turns the screws until you break. Or until you sell," Tom added. "I will not sell." "I know." Tom's voice was gentle. "But he does not care what you will or will not do. He cares about what he can make happen." They buried the cattle. It took most of the day. By the time they finished, the sun was setting and all 3 of them were exhausted. Tom headed back to town, promising to return first thing in the morning. Lydia and Jonah sat on the porch watching the last light fade. "Tell me about Tom," Lydia said. "What about him? Who is he? Where did he come from?" Jonah was quiet for a moment. Then he said Tom Bridger is not his real name. Lydia waited. He showed up here 3 years ago. Hungry, half dead from a fever, running from something he would not talk about. I hired him anyway. Why? Because everyone deserves a second chance. Lydia thought about that. Thought about her own second chance. About the auction platform and the $100 and the choice that had brought her here. What was he running from? That is his story to tell, if he wants to. But I will say this much. He pulled himself up from his bootstraps and became someone better. That is worth something. Tom's story came out 2 days later. They were in the barn, Lydia helping him repair a broken stall door, when he suddenly said, "I killed a man once." Lydia's hands stilled on the hammer. "Did not pull the trigger," Tom continued, "but I was there, and he died because of decisions I made." Silence. I rode with some bad people, did bad things, then one day I woke up and looked at what I had become, and I could not stand it anymore. So I ran. "Why are you telling me this?" Tom looked at her. His eyes were not the suspicious ones she had first met. They were tired, honest. Because Jonah knows. Knew from the start, I think. Hired me anyway, gave me a chance to be someone different. He turned back to the stall door. "You asked why he paid $100 for a stranger. That is why. He believes people can change. Or he used to. Before Margaret." Lydia drove another nail into the wood. "And you think I need to know this because I had a woman once." Tom's voice dropped. "Lost her because of what I was. By the time I became someone better, she was gone. Married someone else. Moved to California." He set down his hammer. "I see the way he looks at you, the way you look at him. Do not let him lose you the way I lost mine." That night, another storm rolled in. Not as fierce as the first, but enough to keep everyone inside. Jonah built up the fire while Lydia made supper. They ate in comfortable silence, the kind that does not need filling. Afterward, Jonah said, "There is something I need to show you." He led her to the closed room. The door was unlocked for the first time since she had arrived. Jonah pushed it open and stepped aside to let her enter. The shrine was exactly as she had glimpsed it through the crack. The cradle, the wedding dress, the dried flowers, the bonnet. But there was more. On a small table by the window sat a locket. Inside was a tiny portrait of a woman with dark hair and kind eyes. "Margaret," Jonah said quietly. Lydia looked at the portrait, at the face of the woman who had loved this broken man and died without him by her side. She was beautiful. She was everything. Jonah moved to stand beside her. The locket was her mother's. She wore it every day. "I found it. After." He did not need to say where he found it. Lydia could imagine. "I keep this room as it was," Jonah continued, "because I do not know how to let go. I do not know how to move forward without feeling like I am leaving her behind." Lydia thought about the child she had buried beside a nameless trail, about the mother who had died despite the stolen medicine, about all the people she had lost and all the grief she had carried. "You do not have to let go," she said finally. "You just have to make room for new things, new people." She looked at him. New life. Jonah was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Her name was supposed to be Eleanor. You told me. I have never told anyone else." Lydia took his hand. It was rough with calluses, warm despite the cold. "Thank you for trusting me with that." Jonah looked at their joined hands, then at her face. "I have not trusted anyone in 2 years. I do not know if I remember how." "Then learn," Lydia said. "Same as me." They stood together in the room full of ghosts. And somehow, for the first time since she had climbed onto that wagon, Lydia felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The attack came 3 days later. Lydia was alone at the house when she heard horses approaching. Too many horses. Coming too fast. She grabbed the rifle Jonah had shown her how to use and moved to the window. 4 riders, all wearing Triple C brands on their saddles. One of them she recognized. Victor Crawford. He dismounted at the porch and called out, "Miss Carver, I know you are in there. I would like to speak with you." Lydia's hands tightened on the rifle. "Mr. Blackwood is not here. I know. That is why I came now." She opened the door but did not step outside. The rifle was pointed at the ground but ready. "Say what you came to say." Crawford smiled. It did not reach his eyes. "You are a clever woman, Miss Carver. Clever enough to know you have gotten yourself into a complicated situation. What do you want?" "I want you to leave." Crawford's tone was pleasant, almost friendly. "Pack your things. Take the stage back east. Forget you ever heard the name Jonah Blackwood, and if I do not, then things will become unpleasant for you, for him, for everyone." Lydia met his eyes. "Is that a threat?" "It is a promise." Crawford took a step closer. "I have been patient with Blackwood, more patient than he deserves, but my patience is ending. Because of the land, because of everything." Crawford's voice hardened. "Because of what he took from me, because of what he continues to take, because I will not rest until he has nothing." Lydia thought about the journal, the letters, the woman who had chosen one man over another. Margaret. Crawford went still. "That is what this is about," Lydia continued. "Not the land, not the water. Her, the woman who chose him instead of you." For a long moment Crawford said nothing. Then he smiled again. And this time there was something terrifying in it. "You are smarter than I gave you credit for, Miss Carver. Too smart to stay here. Remember that." He mounted his horse and rode away with his men. But the threat hung in the air long after he was gone. When Jonah returned that evening, Lydia told him everything. His face went hard as stone. "He threatened you. He told me to leave. Said things would become unpleasant if I did not." Jonah slammed his fist against the table. "I will kill him." "No." Lydia grabbed his arm. "That is what he wants. He wants you to do something stupid so he can destroy you legally." "Then what do you suggest?" "I suggest we stop reacting and start planning." Lydia pulled him toward a chair. "Crawford has been playing this game for years. He knows every move before you make it. We need to change the game." "How?" "By finding out what he is really afraid of. Because a man who has spent 2 years tormenting a neighbor over a woman who chose someone else." Lydia shook her head. "That is not strength. That is weakness. And weakness has cracks." Lydia made a decision. It was stupid, reckless. Exactly the kind of thing her pride had gotten her into before. But she could not shake the feeling that she was missing something. Some piece of the puzzle that would make everything else fall into place. So on the morning of her second week at the ranch, while Jonah was out checking the herd and Tom was in town getting supplies, Lydia borrowed a horse and rode east, toward the Triple C. The ranch was everything Jonah's was not. Huge, sprawling, prosperous. White-painted fences stretched for miles. Fat cattle grazed in green pastures. The house itself was 2 stories of solid brick, with glass windows that caught the morning sun like jewels. Lydia tied her horse at the fence and walked up to the front door. A servant answered. Young man in clean clothes, nothing like the dusty ranch hands she had grown used to. "I am here to see Mr. Crawford," Lydia said. "Tell him Miss Carver would like to speak with him." Crawford received her in a study that cost more than Lydia's entire life. Fine furniture, leather-bound books, a globe in the corner, paintings on the walls. He sat behind a mahogany desk, watching her with those cold eyes. "Miss Carver, I must admit, I did not expect you to come to me. You told me to leave." Lydia sat in the chair across from him without being invited. "I decided I would rather negotiate." Crawford's eyebrows rose. "Negotiate? You want Blackwood's land? I want to know why. I should think that would be obvious. Water rights, grazing access, strategic position." Lydia shook her head. "Those are business reasons. But this is not business. This is personal." Crawford was silent. I found Margaret's letters, Lydia continued. I know she was engaged to you. I know she broke that engagement a week after meeting Jonah. And I know you have never forgiven either of them. Still nothing. So here is my offer. You leave Jonah alone. Stop poisoning his water. Stop pressuring his neighbors. Stop whatever it is you have planned, and in return what? Crawford's voice was soft. What could you possibly offer me that I do not already have? I know where Robert Thornhill is. The name landed like a slap. Crawford's face went through several expressions in quick succession. Surprise, anger, and then something Lydia had not expected. Fear. How do you know that name? He stole $800 from me, Lydia said. Left me with a fraudulent contract. Put me on an auction platform to be sold for $5. Thornhill is dead, Crawford said flatly. He died in Mexico 6 months ago. Did he? Or is that just what you told people? Crawford stood. His chair scraped against the floor. You are playing a dangerous game, Miss Carver. I have been playing dangerous games my whole life. This time I intend to win. What happened next proved that Lydia had miscalculated. Badly. Crawford smiled, and there was nothing pleasant in it. You are a clever woman, Miss Carver. Too clever to have ended up on that auction platform by accident. He pulled something from his desk drawer. A photograph. Robert Thornhill stared up at her from the faded image. Handsome? Smiling? The same smile that had convinced her to trust him with everything she had. He was my brother, Crawford said, half-brother. Same mother, different fathers. He used our mother's maiden name because I asked him to. Lydia's blood went cold. I sent him to St. Louis, Crawford continued, to find someone. A woman desperate enough to follow a man west. Someone who would end up at auction. Someone who would draw out Jonah Blackwood's pathetic hero instincts. You. I knew Jonah would never stand by and watch a woman sold like property. He saved Margaret from a similar situation when she first came west. It is his weakness, his need to rescue. Crawford moved closer. You were supposed to be bait, Miss Carver, a lure to distract him, to give him something to care about. And then I was going to take it away. But here is what I did not expect. He leaned down until his face was inches from hers. I did not expect you to matter. I did not expect him to actually care for you. And I did not expect you to be clever enough to find out the truth. He straightened. Which means I have to change my plans, Lydia tried to leave. Crawford's men blocked the door. You will be my guest for a while, Crawford said pleasantly, until Blackwood comes looking for you. Which he will. Men like him cannot help themselves. He will kill you. He will try. And he will fail. And then I will have everything I've ever wanted. Lydia was dragged from the study and down a set of stairs into darkness. A root cellar beneath one of the outbuildings. Small, cold, dark. They threw her inside and locked the door. Back at the Blackwood Ranch, Jonah returned to find Lydia gone. The horse was missing. Her tracks led east, toward Crawford. Tom arrived an hour later, supplies loaded in his wagon. He took one look at Jonah's face and knew something was wrong. What happened? She went to Crawford. Alone. Tom swore. Why in God's name would she do that? Because she is stubborn, Jonah said. Because she thinks she can fix things herself. Because she does not trust anyone to help her. Sounds like someone else I know. Jonah ignored that. I am going after her. Jonah, I am going after her. Before he could saddle his horse, the barn exploded into flames. Fire burst from the hayloft, consuming the structure with a speed that spoke of kerosene and malice. The horses screamed inside. Tom was already running. Jonah followed. They fought through smoke and flame, kicking open stall doors, driving terrified animals toward safety. The heat was unbearable. Sparks rained down like hellfire. Tom got the last horse out just as a beam collapsed where he had been standing seconds before. The impact knocked him backward, burning debris raining onto his arms and side. He screamed. Jonah dragged him clear as the barn collapsed in on itself, a shower of sparks reaching toward the night sky. Tom. Tom. Tom's face was contorted in pain. Burns covered his forearms and side. But he was alive. Crawford, Tom gasped through gritted teeth, drawing you out and hitting you at the same time. Then Jonah looked around. Really looked. Where is Lydia? Where is she? In the cellar beneath the Triple C, Lydia heard the distant sound of hooves, then nothing. Hours passed, or minutes, she could not tell. She thought about Jonah, about Tom, about everything she had learned and everything she had risked. She thought about her mother dying in a bed Lydia had paid for with stolen money. She thought about the child she had buried beside a nameless trail. She thought about all the choices that had brought her here, the good ones, the bad ones, the ones she would make again, and the ones she wished she could take back. And she realized something. She did not want to die in a hole in the ground, not like this, not alone, not without telling Jonah that she loved him, because she did love him. She had known it for days, maybe weeks, known it and been too afraid to say it. Now she might never get the chance. The cellar door opened. Light flooded in. Lydia shielded her eyes. A figure descended the stairs, tall, broad-shouldered. Jonah? No. Crawford stood over her, his face unreadable. He came, Crawford said, just like I knew he would. Rode right up to my front door. Demanded I release you. Is he alive? For now. Crawford smiled, but not for long. Jonah Blackwood had not had a drink since the day of the auction. Not one. For 2 years he had drowned himself in whiskey. Let it wash away the guilt, the grief, the memory of coming home at dawn to find Margaret cold on the floor. But something had changed when he watched Lydia stand on that platform. Something had shifted when she lifted her chin and refused to beg. He wanted to be worthy of that moment. He wanted to be the man Tom remembered, the one who rode 30 miles in a blizzard for a stranger's child, the one who laughed loud enough to echo across the valley. He wanted to live. Tom was hurt but conscious. The burns on his arms and side were serious but not fatal. He lay on the ground outside the ruined barn, teeth gritted against the pain. Go, he said, I will live. She might not. Jonah did not argue. He cleaned his gun, saddled his horse, moved with a focus he had not felt in 2 years. The night was cold and clear. Stars spread across the sky like scattered diamonds. The mountains rose black against the horizon. He rode toward the Triple C, toward Lydia, toward whatever was waiting for him there. Crawford's ranch was lit up like a beacon. Torches lined the drive. Armed men walked the grounds. Someone was expecting company. Jonah did not sneak, did not skulk in the shadows. He rode straight up the main drive and dismounted at the front door. Crawford emerged onto the porch, flanked by armed men, smiling that terrible smile. Blackwood. I wondered how long it would take. Let her go, Jonah said. This is between you and me. It has always been between you and me, Crawford replied. She is just the latest thing you have stolen that belongs to someone else. Margaret made her choice. Did she? Crawford stepped closer. Or did you take her the way you take everything? By being there at the right moment with the right smile while better men do the actual work? Crawford had intelligence. Spies in town. People who had seen Jonah the night Margaret died. People who knew where he had been. What he had been doing. I know what happened, Crawford said. The night she died, you were in town, drinking yourself blind because you found out about me. About her and me. You could not stand that she had loved someone before you. Jonah said nothing. His silence was confession. You left her alone, Crawford continued. She called for you. She bled out calling your name while you were passed out in a saloon. He stepped closer still. And you have the gall to pretend you are a good man? The words landed like blows. Because they were true, or true enough. Crawford offered a choice. Sign over the deed to the ranch, all 400 acres, water rights included. and Lydia goes free. Refuse, and they both die. Crawford will claim self-defense. Sheriff Yates will back him up. Jonah thought about the land, about Margaret's grave on the hill, about everything he had built with his own 2 hands. Then he thought about Lydia, standing on that platform, refusing to beg. He signed. Crawford took the deed. Crawford took the... smiled, nodded to his men. I said she goes free. I did not say anything about you. They beat him, not to death, just enough to hurt, to humiliate, to remind him who had won. Then they dragged him down a set of stairs and threw him into darkness. The cellar door slammed shut above him. Lydia heard the door open, heard a body hit the ground. She crawled toward the sound in the darkness. Found him, blood on his face, barely conscious. She pulled his head into her lap, pressed her hands against his wounds. Don't you die, she whispered. You do not have permission to die. Time passed. Minutes or hours, she could not tell. The cellar was small, stone-walled, pitch black. Water seeped through the floor from the recent rains, cold and rising. Jonah drifted in and out of consciousness. Lydia held him, talked to him, told him things she had never told anyone, about her mother, about the stolen money, about Robert and the lies she had chosen to believe, about the child she had buried alone. She told him everything, laid her soul bare in the darkness because she thought they were going to die, and she could not bear to die with secrets between them. Jonah woke fully somewhere in the telling. He listened in silence. When she finished, he said, We have both been running from who we really are. Yes, maybe it is time to stop. In the darkness, they found each other's hands. Jonah, Lydia said, I need to tell you something. You do not have to. I love you. Silence. I know it is stupid. I know we have known each other for 2 weeks. I know this is the worst possible time to say it, but I do. I love you. And if we are going to die in this hole, I want you to know. More silence. Then Jonah said, I want to live. What? For the first time in 2 years, I want to live. Because of you. Because you showed me it was possible to be more than grief and guilt and whiskey. He squeezed her hand. And if we get out of here? When? When we get out of here, I want to spend the rest of my life showing you what that means. They sat together in the darkness. Then Lydia said, When we get out of here, you are going to live like you mean it. No more shrines, no more whiskey, no more dying slow. And you? I'm going to stop running, stop pretending I do not need anyone. She paused. I think I might need you. I know I need you. Their foreheads touched in the darkness. Above them came the sound of footsteps. The cellar door groaned open. Light flooded in. They shielded their eyes. A familiar voice said, Well, you two look terrible. Tom Bridger stood at the top of the stairs, bandaged and burned and upright. Behind him, 5 men with rifles. How? Lydia managed. Tom grinned, though it was pained. You think I was going to lie there while Crawford won? I crawled to town and knocked on every door of every family he has ever hurt. He stepped aside to reveal Patrick Brennan, James Porter, others she did not recognize. Turns out a lot of people were just waiting for someone to go first. The ride to the Triple C had been a blur of pain and determination for Tom Bridger. His burns screamed with every movement. The bandages Jonah had hastily wrapped were already soaked through with fluid. Every jolt of his horse sent fresh agony through his arms and side. But he kept riding. Because Jonah Blackwood had given him a second chance when no one else would. And Tom Bridger paid his debts. The town of Sweetwater Crossing was dark when he arrived. Most folks were asleep. The saloon was still lit, but Tom did not go there. He went to the small houses on the edge of town, the ones where families lived, families that Crawford had pushed, threatened, and stolen from. He started with Patrick Brennan. The older rancher answered the door with a shotgun in his hands and suspicion in his eyes. Bridger. It is the middle of the night. Crawford has Jonah and the woman. Tom's voice was rough with pain. He burned the barn, poisoned the cattle, and now he has them. Brennan was quiet for a long moment. Then his wife Helen appeared behind him. "Patrick," she said, "you know what Crawford has done to this valley. You know what he will keep doing if someone does not stop him. This is not our fight. It is everyone's fight," Tom said. "That is the point. Alone, none of us can stand against him. But together—" He let the sentence hang. Brennan looked at his wife, at the shotgun in his hands, at the darkness outside where Crawford's empire stretched for miles. "Give me 10 minutes. They went door to door, the Porters, the Hendersons, the Wilsons, who had supposedly sold out but were still living in their farmhouse, too proud to leave. Tom told the same story at each one: Crawford, Jonah, the woman from the auction, everything that had happened. And at each door, he asked the same question: "Are you with us?" Some said no, too scared, too beaten down. But enough said yes. By dawn, they had 8 men, armed, ready, scared, but determined. Tom also sent a wire to Cheyenne, to the territorial marshal's office, laying out everything he knew about Crawford's crimes: the poisoned water, the burned barn, the false imprisonment. Then they rode. At the Triple C, Crawford was celebrating. He had Blackwood's deed. He had Blackwood himself, locked in a cellar. He had the woman who had proven too clever for her own good. Everything was falling into place. He sat in his study with a glass of fine whiskey, looking at the locket he always kept close. Margaret's face stared up at him from the tiny portrait. "Almost finished," he said to her. "Then he will have nothing. Just like me." He closed the locket. Then he heard the hooves. Tom Bridger led the charge. Not a charge exactly, more of a calculated approach. 8 men spreading out to surround the Triple C ranch house, cutting off exits, taking positions. Crawford's men were numerous but not prepared. They had been expecting a broken widower to come begging, not an armed posse. When 2 territorial deputies appeared from the east, responding to Tom's wire, the calculation changed entirely. Crawford emerged onto the porch. His face was a mask of controlled rage. "This is private property. You are trespassing." Jonah climbed from the cellar with Lydia's help. He was battered and bloody, but standing. "We are citizens making a lawful arrest," he said. "Deputy Marshal Dorset here has questions about arson, assault, false imprisonment, and about a dozen other charges." Crawford's careful mask cracked. Years of planning, years of patience, years of slow destruction, collapsing because one burned man had crawled to town and knocked on doors. "You think this ends it?" Crawford's voice rose. "You think papers and badges matter? I will have lawyers. I will appeal. I will—" "Maybe," Jonah said quietly. "But you will do it from a cell. And I will be here, still standing on land you could not take." Crawford drew his gun. Not on Jonah, on Lydia, the coward's choice, the last desperate act of a man who had run out of options. Tom Bridger moved faster than anyone expected for a burned man. He threw himself into the bullet's path. The shot took him in the chest. Chaos erupted. Deputies wrestled Crawford down. Brennan and Porter secured his men. Jonah caught Tom as he fell. Tom. Tom. Tom's eyes were already glazing. Blood bubbled at his lips. The wound was too severe, too close to the heart. "Told you," Tom gasped. "I owed you. You owed me nothing. Nothing." "Owed myself, then." Tom's eyes found Lydia, who knelt beside them. "Take care of him. He is bad at taking care of himself." Lydia was crying. "I will." Tom looked back at Jonah. 30 miles. Blizzard, remember? "I remember. That man is still in there." Tom's hand gripped Jonah's weakly. "Let him out. For me." Tom Bridger died in Jonah's arms as the sun rose over the mountains. Crawford was bound and bleeding. A deputy had subdued him with a rifle butt when he tried to run. Now he knelt in the dirt, his fine clothes stained with dust and blood. As they led him away, he looked at Jonah with pure hatred. "This is not over." Jonah stood over Tom's body. His face was wet with tears. "For you it is." They carried Tom's body back to the Blackwood Ranch, laid him out in the main room where Lydia had scrubbed the table clean just 2 weeks ago, covered him with a blanket, lit candles around him. Jonah sat beside him all night. Lydia sat beside Jonah. Neither spoke. There was nothing to say, but she held his hand, and sometimes that was enough. Victor Crawford was tried by the territorial court in Cheyenne. The charges were extensive: murder, arson, conspiracy, false imprisonment, assault, fraud. 8 families testified against him. Lydia testified. Jonah testified. The trial lasted 3 days. The verdict was guilty on all counts. The judge pronounced sentence. For the murder of Tom Bridger and the multitude of other crimes proven before this court, Victor Crawford was sentenced to hang. The execution took place 3 weeks later at the Wyoming Territorial Prison in Laramie. Jonah did not attend. Neither did Lydia. Some things did not need witnessing. Sheriff Yates was removed from office. His trial for corruption would come later. For now, he sat in a cell in Cheyenne awaiting justice. Clara Dorsett was appointed acting sheriff of Sweetwater Crossing, the first woman to hold law enforcement office in the territory. She was tough, fair, exactly what the town needed. Robert Thornhill was named in federal warrants, but he had fled to Mexico months ago. Crawford had told the truth about one thing at least. His brother was gone, a loose end, but not one that threatened them anymore. The deed Crawford had forced Jonah to sign was invalidated, signed under duress, witnessed by the deputies who had found them in the cellar. The land was still Jonah's. The water was still his. Margaret's grave was still his. And slowly, carefully, life began again. They buried Tom Bridger on the hill beside Margaret. The whole valley came to the funeral. People who had never met Tom Bridger stood at his grave because he represented something now. The cost of standing up, and the possibility that standing up could work. Jonah spoke. "Tom Bridger saved my life twice. Once by working beside me when I was not worth working for, and once by dying so I could live." His voice broke. He spent his last years trying to become someone better than who he had been. He succeeded. I hope I can do the same. The weeks after the funeral were hard. Grief and relief tangled together in ways that made no sense. Lydia would find herself laughing one moment and crying the next. Jonah was the same, but they had each other, and somehow that was enough. Neighbors helped rebuild the barn. Patrick Brennan brought lumber. James Porter brought hands. The Hendersons sent food. The Wilsons sent their sons to help with the work. Community. That was what Tom's sacrifice had built. Not just justice for one man's crimes, but connection between people who had been too afraid to trust each other. The new barn was smaller than the old one, but solid, well made. They painted a name above the door. Tom's barn. Lydia kept working, cooking, cleaning, mending. But now there was no edge of desperation to it. She did it because she wanted to. Not because she was trying to earn her place. She had earned her place. In the cellar. In the darkness. In the moment when she had told Jonah she loved him and meant every word. One evening, Jonah found her on the porch. The sun was setting behind the mountains. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink and gold. "I have been thinking," he said. "Dangerous habit." The ghost of a smile crossed his face. "About what comes next." Lydia waited. "I want to marry you." She turned to look at him. His face was serious, vulnerable. This was not a business proposal. "I know it is soon," Jonah continued. "I know we have been through—" "I love you," Lydia said. "I think you know that. But But I do not know who I am yet. Not really. I have spent my whole life running. From poverty, from shame, from one bad decision to the next. I need to find out who Lydia Carver is when she is not running. Jonah absorbed this. How long? I do not know. A few months? A year? Lydia took his hand. I am not saying no. I am saying wait. Can you do that? Jonah looked at her. At the woman who had stood on an auction platform and refused to beg. At the woman who had held him in a dark cellar and told him she loved him. At the woman who had changed everything. I waited 2 years to feel anything at all, he said. I can wait a little longer for the right thing. Winter came. Snow blanketed the valley. The creek froze over. The cattle huddled together for warmth. Lydia and Jonah huddled together too. Not as lovers, not yet, but as partners, as friends, as two people learning to trust each other one day at a time. They talked about everything, about Margaret, about Robert, about Tom, about the children they had lost, the people they had been, the people they wanted to become. They talked about the future. Lydia wanted to start a school. There were children in the valley who had never learned to read. She had the skills to teach them. Jonah wanted to expand the ranch, buy more land, build something that would last. They made plans, tentative at first, then bolder. Spring came slowly. The snow melted. The creek thawed. Green shoots pushed through the brown earth. Lydia stood at the window one morning watching the sun rise. Something was different. She felt strange, nauseous, sensitive to smells. She counted back the days. One night, after Tom's funeral, when grief and exhaustion and need had all collided. She pressed a hand to her belly. She did not tell Jonah right away. First, she needed to decide what it meant. Not for them, for her. This was her body, her choice, her life. She had spent so long letting others make decisions for her. Robert Crawford, circumstances beyond her control. Not this time. This time, she would choose. She chose life. She chose Jonah. She chose to stop running. The conversation happened on a spring evening. They were sitting on the porch. The air smelled of new growth. Birds sang in the trees by the creek. I need to tell you something, Lydia said. Jonah looked at her. I am pregnant. His face went through several expressions. Shock, fear, joy, more fear. I am terrified, he admitted. Good, so am I. What do we do? Lydia took his hand. We live. Together, we build something. We raise this child to know that they are loved, and we stop being afraid of happiness. Jonah was quiet for a long time. Then he said, marry me. I thought we agreed to wait. We did. But I do not want to wait anymore. I do not want to spend another day pretending I am not completely in love with you. Lydia looked at him. At the man who had paid $100 for a stranger, who had saved a calf that most men would have left to die, who had fought his way out of darkness because she had given him a reason to try. I have a condition, she said. Name it. I want to do it my way. Jonah smiled, the first real smile she had seen from him since the day they met. I would not have it any other way. Summer came to the valley. The grass grew tall. The cattle fattened. The barn that bore Tom's name stood proud against the blue sky. And Lydia Carver prepared to hold her own auction. She sent invitations to everyone in the valley. No explanation. Just a request to come to the Blackwood Ranch on Saturday afternoon. There was something she needed to say. They came. The Brennans, the Porters, the Hendersons and Wilsons. Sarah Porter with her new baby on her hip. Clara Dorset in her sheriff's badge. Lydia stood on the porch. Not a platform, but elevated enough to be seen. She was showing now. Her belly round beneath her blue cotton dress, the same dress she had worn on the auction platform a year ago. Reclaimed. A year ago, she began, I stood on an auction platform in town. and men decided I was worth $5. Murmurs. Everyone remembered I was humiliated, terrified, certain that my life was over. She paused. Then a man I had never met paid $100 to set me free, not to own me, to free me, to give me a choice when everyone else had decided I did not deserve one. She looked at Jonah, who stood at the bottom of the porch steps. Today I am holding my own auction, but this time I am the one making the sale. She turned to face him fully. Jonah Blackwood, would you like to place a bid? The crowd went silent. Jonah looked up at her. His eyes were bright. I do not have $5, he said. His voice was thick. But I have everything I am, everything I hope to be, every day left in this life. Is that your final offer? It is my only offer. Lydia smiled. Sold. The wedding was simple. In the garden, Lydia had restored from ruin. Among neighbors who had become family. No fancy dress, just the blue cotton. The vows were simple too. No promises to obey. Just promises to stay, to try, to choose each other every day. Helen Brennan cried. Patrick pretended not to. Fall came. The leaves turned gold and red. The air grew crisp. The cattle were rounded up and counted. And on a clear October morning, Lydia gave birth to a daughter. The baby had her father's gray eyes and her mother's stubborn chin. They did not name her Eleanor. That name belonged to someone who did not get to exist. Instead, they chose Hope. Jonah held his daughter for the first time with trembling hands. He looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world, because she was. That evening, Lydia asked him for something, the key to Margaret's room. He gave it to her without hesitation. She entered alone. The wedding dress, the cradle, the dried flowers, everything preserved for 2 years as a shrine to grief. Lydia spoke to Margaret as if she could hear. I will take care of him. I know I cannot replace you, and I will not try. But I will love him the way he deserves. Present, not perfect. She touched the cradle. And this little one will know about Eleanor, about the sister she almost had, about the woman who dreamed her. She closed the door gently. Not locked this time, just closed. Some rooms need to stay accessible, even if we do not enter them often. Spring returned to the valley. The snow melted. The creek ran high with snowmelt. Wildflowers bloomed in the pastures. And on the Blackwood Ranch, life flourished. Hope was 6 months old now. She laughed easily, cried loudly, had discovered her hands and found them endlessly fascinating. Lydia watched her daughter discover the world with a joy that sometimes took her breath away. This was what she had been running toward her whole life. She just had not known it. The school opened in May, a small building at the edge of the property built with help from the neighbors. Lydia taught 3 days a week, reading, writing, arithmetic. The children came from all over the valley. Some had never held a book before. By summer, they were reading simple sentences, their faces when they understood, when the symbols on the page suddenly became words, when words became stories. That was worth everything. Jonah was different now. Not the hollow man who had emerged from the saloon shadows a year ago. Not the grieving widower drowning in whiskey. He laughed again, smiled, made jokes that were actually funny. He still visited Margaret's grave, still kept her memory close. But he no longer lived in her shadow. He lived in the light. Summer brought visitors. Clara Dorset came by to report that the last of Crawford's empire had been sold off, the land distributed among the families he had pushed out. Justice, finally, for years of cruelty. Patrick Brennan came to discuss a water-sharing agreement. His land bordered theirs now, made sense to cooperate. Helen Brennan came to see the baby, spent an hour making faces at Hope while Lydia laughed. Community. This was what it looked like, what it felt like. Lydia had never had this before. She would never let it go. One evening, as the summer stretched toward fall, Lydia stood on the porch. Hope was in her arms. The ranch spread below, Tom's barn stood proud in the evening light. The cattle grazed peacefully. The mountains rose purple against the sunset. Jonah walked up from the pasture, dusty from work, tired but content. He stopped at the bottom of the steps and looked up at his wife and daughter. "Coming home?" Lydia asked. "Already there," he said. He climbed the steps, kissed his daughter's forehead, then his wife's lips. They stood together, watching the sun set. On the hill, two graves wore crowns of summer wildflowers. Margaret Blackwood, Tom Bridger. The dead do not need our grief forever. Sometimes they just need to know we learned to live. Hope curled her tiny fingers around Lydia's thumb, holding on, holding tight. The way Lydia had held on through everything. The auction, the cellar, the darkness. The way Jonah had held on through 2 years of grief and guilt. The way they held on to each other now. "Do you ever think about it?" Jonah asked. "The auction." "Sometimes," Lydia admitted, "but not the way I used to." "How then?" "Like a doorway. The moment when my real life began. Because I bought the contract? Because you gave me a choice." The stars were coming out now, one by one, then dozens, then hundreds. Lydia remembered standing on that platform, feeling the gavel about to fall, believing her life was over. She had been wrong. Her life had not been over. It had been just beginning. Hope made a sound, a gurgle of contentment. "She is happy," Jonah said. "She has everything she needs," Lydia replied. "Food, warmth, love, a home." Home. The word had meant nothing to Lydia a year ago. She had never had one. Not really. Now she understood. Home was not a place. It was people, choices. The willingness to stay when leaving would be easier. Home was this ranch, this man, this child. Home was everything she had fought for and everything she had almost lost. "I love you," Jonah said. "I know." He smiled, still so strange to see. After 2 years of emptiness. "Say it back." Lydia looked at him. At the man who had paid $100 to free a stranger, who had given her a choice when no one else would, who had fought his way out of darkness because she had given him a reason to try. "I love you too." They went inside. The house was warm. The fire crackled. Everything was exactly as it should be. Lydia put Hope in the cradle. Not the old one from Margaret's room. A new one. That Jonah had built himself. "From the oak tree we planted when we first arrived," he had said. "Like Margaret wanted. Full circle." Lydia stood by the window, looking out at the mountains, the stars, the valley that had become her home. A year ago she had been worth $5. Now she was priceless. Not because someone else had decided, because she had. Jonah came to stand beside her. "What are you thinking?" "About choices," Lydia said. "About the ones we make, and the ones we do not realize we are making until it is too late." "And?" "And I would make the same ones again. All of them, even the mistakes. Because they led me here." They stood together in the quiet house, husband and wife, partners, friends, survivors. Outside, the night was full of sounds, wind through pines, distant coyotes, cattle lowing in the pastures, frontier sounds, western sounds, the sounds of a life Lydia had never imagined, and now could not imagine living without. Hope made a small sound in her cradle. Lydia went to her, picked her up, held her close. The baby's eyes were gray, like her father's, like storm clouds before rain. But there was nothing stormy in them now. Only peace, only trust, only love. "This is what we built," Lydia whispered. "From ashes, from pain, from choices. This is home." She carried Hope to the window, showed her the stars, the mountains, the valley spread below. "Someday," Lydia said, "I will tell you a story about a woman who was sold for $5. and a silent cowboy who said, "I will take her home." Hope blinked up at her with those gray eyes. But not tonight. Tonight we just live. Jonah's arms came around them both, his wife, his daughter, his second chance. "Home," he said. Not a question this time, a declaration. And somewhere on the hill, under a blanket of summer stars, two graves stood watch. Margaret Blackwood, who had loved Jonah first, who had dreamed of a daughter named Eleanor, who had died alone but was not forgotten. Tom Bridger, who had ridden with bad men and become someone better, who had given his life so others could live, who had paid a debt that had never been owed. Their stories were over. But the stories they had made possible were just beginning. The wind blew through the valley, carrying the scent of sage and pine, the promise of rain, the whisper of something that might have been voices, or might have been nothing at all. Lydia closed her eyes, felt Jonah's arms around her, Hope's weight in her arms, the warmth of home surrounding her. And for the first time since St. Louis, since the auction, since the cellar and the darkness and the fear, she was exactly where she was meant to be. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.